On February 28, 2026, more American combat aircraft filled the skies above Iran than any nation had seen overhead since the fall of Baghdad. But here is what separates this air campaign from anything that came before. 7 fighter jets are not just dropping bombs, they are working together as a single integrated weapon, and each one fills a role that no other aircraft on the planet could match. Number 7. The A-10 Thunderbolt II. Most people call it the Warthog. It is the oldest design still flying combat missions for the United States Air Force, and if the Pentagon had gotten its way, this airplane would have been scrapped years ago. Instead, Congress kept it alive because the troops on the ground refused to let it go. Here is why. The A-10 was purpose-built in the 1970s for a single mission: fly low and slow over a European battlefield, destroy Soviet tanks with the massive cannon bolted into its nose, and survive ground fire that would shred any other airplane in the inventory. And that cannon deserves a closer look because nothing else in modern aviation comes close to it. Its official name is the GAU-8 Avenger, a 7-barrel rotary weapon that fires depleted uranium rounds at a rate of nearly 4,000 per minute. Every other component of the airframe was designed around it. Engineers wrapped the cockpit in a titanium bathtub capable of absorbing direct hits from 23mm anti-aircraft shells. They mounted the twin turbofan engines high on the rear fuselage, shielded from ground fire by the broad wings and the twin tail fins. Even the landing gear was designed to protrude slightly when retracted, so a belly landing on a cratered runway would not destroy the jet. During the 1991 Gulf War, A-10 pilots destroyed more than 900 Iraqi tanks, 2,000 military vehicles, and over 1,000 artillery pieces in 6 weeks of combat. Warthogs flew home with chunks of wing missing, hydraulic lines severed, and entire engines shot out. One pilot landed safely after a surface-to-air missile blew a hole in the fuselage large enough to see daylight through. The aircraft earned its reputation for survivability, not through marketing, but through the kind of punishment that would have left any other fighter as wreckage in the desert sand. But toughness alone does not explain why this aircraft keeps showing up in combat zones 30 years after the Air Force tried to scrap it. Air Force leadership has pushed to retire the Warthog for decades, arguing that faster, stealthier aircraft can do the same job. Ground troops disagree violently. When soldiers are pinned down and calling for close air support, the A-10 can loiter overhead for hours, identify targets with its own eyes through the targeting pod, and place rounds accurately on enemy positions at distances where faster jets routinely overshoot. At least one squadron of A-10s was confirmed operating in the Middle East ahead of Operation Epic Fury. In the weeks before the campaign launched, Warthog pilots flew joint training missions over the Persian Gulf alongside United States Navy warships, rehearsing low-altitude attack runs against Iranian fast attack boats and coastal missile batteries along the Strait of Hormuz. Whether this aircraft has flown strike missions into Iranian territory remains unclear. Pentagon officials have not confirmed specific taskings during Epic Fury, but its presence in the theater sends a message all by itself. If American ground forces ever need covering fire in the deserts or the mountain passes of western Iran, the ugliest airplane in the inventory will be the first one overhead. While the Warthog brings brute force to the lowest altitudes of the battlefield, the next aircraft on this list was designed to fly directly into the teeth of enemy air defenses and rip them apart from the inside. Number 6, the F-16 Fighting Falcon. More than 4,500 of these jets have been built since the late 1970s, making the F-16 the most produced Western fighter of the post-Vietnam era. Dozens of air forces around the world fly some variant, but the Fighting Falcons deployed to the Middle East for Operation Epic Fury are not ordinary multi-role fighters. They are wild weasels. The name dates back to the Vietnam War, when American pilots volunteered to fly directly at North Vietnamese surface-to-air missile sites. Their job was to deliberately trigger enemy radar so they could locate the batteries and destroy them before the missiles found their mark. The unofficial motto of those original Wild Weasel Cruise was a phrase not suitable for family audiences, but it roughly meant you had to be out of your mind to volunteer. Modern Wild Weasel variants of the F-16 carry AGM-88 HARM anti-radiation missiles. These weapons home in on the electromagnetic energy that radar dishes broadcast. When an Iranian air defense operator activates a radar system to track incoming American aircraft, the HARM missile locks onto that signal and follows it straight to the antenna. From the operator's perspective, the choice is binary. Keep the radar running and get killed. Shut it down and go blind. What makes the HARM particularly effective is that it remembers the radar's location even if the operator shuts down. Later versions of the missile can navigate to the last known position of the signal using inertial guidance and a GPS receiver. Iranian radar crews learned this lesson during the 12-day war in June 2025, when several S-300 batteries were destroyed despite powering down their emitters. The result is a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. Air defense operators across Iran now face the knowledge that simply turning on their equipment may be the last decision they make. Flight tracking data confirmed that 12 of these jets from the South Carolina Air National Guard landed at Largesse Field in the Azores in mid-February 2026, staging for transit to the Middle East. These were the Swamp Foxes, a unit with deep experience in the suppression of enemy air defenses mission. Additional Wild Weasel units deployed from Spangdahlem Air Base in Germany soon after. During Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, when 7 B-2 stealth bombers struck 3 Iranian nuclear sites at Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan, Wild Weasel F-16 jets played a critical role. They raced ahead of the bomber formation, acting as decoys and radar hunters, systematically suppressing Iranian air defense coverage along the ingress routes. That same playbook was almost certainly repeated during the opening hours of Epic Fury, with Wild Weasel pilots once again clearing the path through the densest concentrations of surface-to-air missile batteries. Without the Wild Weasel mission, none of the other aircraft on this list could safely operate over Iranian airspace. It is arguably the hardest and least glamorous job in the air campaign, and everything depends on it. Speaking of dangerous work, the Wild Weasels punch holes in the enemy radar network, but someone has to fly through those gaps carrying heavy ordnance and deliver it against fortified targets buried deep inside Iran. That responsibility falls to an aircraft that has been doing the job longer and harder than any other fighter in the American fleet. Number 5, the F-15E Strike Eagle. When the F-15 airframe first flew in 1972, it was a pure AIR superiority machine. Its original motto was blunt, not a pound for air to ground. Every ounce was dedicated to winning dogfights against Soviet interceptors. Then McDonnell Douglas did something the original designers would have hated. Engineers took the two-seat trainer variant, reinforced its airframe for heavy loads, bolted on conformal fuel tanks that hug the fuselage to reduce drag, installed a rear-seat weapons systems officer with a dedicated Lantiren targeting pod, and created a fighter bomber that can haul more than 23,000 pounds of ordnance while still outrunning anything it meets on the way home. The Strike Eagle became the spearhead of the current build-up. Between January 18th and January 21st, 2026, approximately 35 Strike Eagles from the 494th Expeditionary Fighter Squadron arrived at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, having crossed the Atlantic from RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom. A second wave of 12 more jets followed within days. Jordan's Desert Air Base transformed into one of the densest concentrations of American fighter power on the planet almost overnight. During Epic Fury, Strike Eagles are believed to have flown deep penetration missions carrying mixed loads of laser-guided bombs, GPS-guided JDAMs, and AIM-120 air-to-air missiles on single sorties. By March 4th, the Air Force was shifting from expensive standoff weapons to conventional precision munitions, dropping 500-pound, 1,000-pound, and 2,000-pound guided bombs as the Iranian air defense network degraded. Strike Eagles bore the bulk of that transition, hauling ordnance into airspace that the Growlers and Wild Weasels had cleared just hours before. What makes this aircraft indispensable is the crew in the back seat. The weapons systems officer operates the targeting pod, manages electronic countermeasures, and handles navigation on low-level ingress routes, while the pilot focuses on flying the aircraft through hostile airspace. That division of labor is what allows the Strike Eagle to handle missions no single-seat fighter pilot could manage alone. finding a camouflaged mobile missile launcher on a dark desert road, locking a laser designator onto the target, and guiding a 2,000-pound bomb through its roof while monitoring threat receivers for surface-to-air missile launches is work that requires two highly trained minds working in concert. Yet the aircraft has also seen tragedy during this conflict, a reminder that even highly capable machines operate at the mercy of human decisions made under extreme pressure. On March 4th, 3 Strike Eagles were shot down over Kuwait in what the Pentagon confirmed as a friendly fire incident. All 6 crew members, 3 pilots and 3 weapon systems officers ejected safely and were recovered with minor injuries thanks to the local Kuwaiti community. An investigation is ongoing, and the incident underscores the staggering complexity of coordinating hundreds of aircraft across contested airspace in real time. Even with those losses, this jet remains the heavy lifter of the air campaign. No other fighter carries as much ordnance as deep into hostile territory, and no other absorbs as much risk on every sortie. Everything else on this list depends on the Strike Eagle doing the grinding, dangerous work of tearing apart Iranian military infrastructure one target at a time. Now, the AIR war over Iran is not confined to land bases hundreds of miles south in the warm waters of the Arabian Sea. 2 of the largest warships ever built are launching their own fighter squadrons around the clock, and the backbone of those carrier air wings is an aircraft that has quietly become one of the most combat-tested fighters in American history. Number 4, the FA-18E and F Super Hornet. Here is an aircraft that will never win a popularity contest. It does not carry the stealth mystique of the Raptor. It lacks the technological hype surrounding the Lightning II. What it brings instead is reliability, versatility, and sheer numbers that no other carrier-based fleet can match. As of early 2026, the Navy operates approximately 325 single-seat E models and 252-seat F models. A combined fleet of nearly 600 airframes makes the Super Hornet family the largest carrier-based combat force anywhere on Earth. So what does that fleet actually look like in action over Iran? Aboard the USS Gerald R. Ford, operating in the Eastern Mediterranean, Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadrons 31, 37, and 87 are flying daily strike missions against Iranian targets on the USS Abraham Lincoln in the Arabian Sea. Additional squadrons are doing the same. These jets haul the heavy bomb loads in JDM and laser-guided configurations that the campaign's non-hardened targets demand. Between bombing runs, they rotate into combat air patrol, protecting the carrier operating areas from Iranian drones and anti-ship missiles. Some even serve as airborne tankers, transferring fuel from their own external tanks to extend the range of other aircraft in the formation. At roughly $67 million per airframe and $18,000 to $22,000 per flight hour. The Super Hornet costs about 40% less to operate than an F-35. When the campaign requires hundreds of strike sorties per day, stretching over weeks, that economic advantage becomes a strategic one, but cost is only half the equation. What really sets this aircraft apart in a sustained campaign is the tempo it can maintain. Navy pilots have described the current operational tempo as the heaviest sustained carrier-based combat since the Second World War. If that sounds dramatic, consider what these air wings are doing. Daily strikes against ballistic missile sites, drone launch facilities, and Iranian naval targets in the Persian Gulf. Defensive patrols against coordinated waves of Shahed drones and anti-ship cruise missiles. Recovery operations for downed pilots, all of it simultaneously around the clock from a floating runway in hostile waters. The Ford brings a technological edge to this workload. Its electromagnetic aircraft launch system, called EMALS, replaces the steam catapults used on older Nimitz-class carriers. EMALS can launch Super Hornets with less stress on the airframes and more consistent acceleration, allowing the Ford to generate sorties at a rate that exceeds what previous carriers could sustain. In a campaign demanding continuous air operations measured in weeks rather than days, that edge becomes decisive. Even the Super Hornet's production economics tell a story. Boeing's final production run of 17 aircraft in 2024 cost roughly $64.7 million per jet, essentially the same price in inflation-adjusted terms as aircraft built 15 years earlier. Decades of cost discipline on the production line mean the Navy has been able to field its massive fleet without the budget crises that have plagued other fighter programs. It will never be the star of the show, but without the Super Hornet, the show does not happen. If you are finding this breakdown helpful, take a second to subscribe. There is a lot more to cover on the technology shaping this conflict, and new developments are unfolding every day. Now, the Super Hornet is the workhorse that keeps the carriers fighting. But there is one variant of the same airframe that might matter more to this campaign than any individual fighter. It carries no bombs, it does not shoot down enemy planes. What it does instead is far stranger and arguably far more devastating. Number 3, the EA-18G Growler. Start with a 2-seat FA-18F Super Hornet, remove the internal cannon, replace the wingtip missile rails with sensor pods, bolt 5AN ALQ-99 tactical jamming pods under the wings and fuselage. Seat an electronic warfare officer in the rear cockpit with controls that look like something borrowed from a different century. You now have the only dedicated tactical electronic attack aircraft in the Western world. Its mission sounds deceptively simple: blind the enemy completely. Iran's air defenses depend on radar to detect incoming aircraft, track their speed and altitude, and guide surface-to-air missiles to intercept them. Systems like the Russian-supplied S-300, the domestically built Bavar 373, and the Chinese-made JY-27. A long-range detection radar all operate by broadcasting electromagnetic energy and reading what bounces back. When a Growler enters the picture, those frequencies drown in electronic noise. Iranian operators see nothing but static. Tracking locks shatter. Missile guidance systems lose their targets entirely. In military terminology, this creates a radar blackout that transforms a layered billion-dollar air defense network into an expensive collection of inert metal. And if an Iranian radar operator attempts to burn through the jamming by increasing transmission power, the Growler has a lethal response waiting. An AGM-88E advanced anti-radiation guided missile homes in on that boosted signal and physically destroys the transmitter at its source. Activate your radar and you die. Leave it off and you cannot see what is coming for you. What makes this aircraft even more effective is that it does not need to fly anywhere near the targets it blinds. Standoff jamming allows Growlers to operate from hundreds of miles away, projecting electronic interference across vast swaths of airspace while remaining safely outside the range of the very defenses they are suppressing. The pilots and electronic warfare officers stay alive while the enemy's entire detection architecture collapses. 15 of these aircraft are spread across the Ford and Lincoln carrier strike groups. In an unusual move ahead of Epic Fury, the Navy also deployed 6 Growlers to Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, putting land-based jamming capability alongside the F-15Es and F-35s already operating from that desert installation. Working together as a coordinated network, Growlers from carriers and land bases can project an electronic shield over formations of more than 150 Allied warplanes simultaneously. During the opening phase of Epic Fury, they reportedly suppressed Iran's entire integrated air defense system, carving safe corridors through which non-stealth aircraft like the Super Hornet and the Strike Eagle could operate deep inside Iranian airspace without facing guided missile fire. Several defense analysts have argued that this might be the single most important aircraft in the entire campaign, not because of the targets it destroys, but because of what it prevents the enemy from ever doing in the first place. From the invisible war of electrons and frequencies, we turn to an aircraft that combines stealth, sensors, and precision strike into a single frame. It is one that achieved a combat milestone during this very conflict. Number 2, the F-35 Lightning II. Depending on who you ask, the F-35 program is either the future of Western air power or the most expensive weapons procurement disaster in military history. Development costs across the program's lifetime have exceeded $1.7 trillion. Critics have spent 2 decades pointing to software delays, cost overruns, and maintenance headaches. Operation Epic Fury may have settled the argument. Flight tracking data showed 18 F-35A aircraft transiting from RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom to the Middle East during mid-February, joining 12 already in place from the Vermont Air National Guard. Combined, roughly 30 of these stealth fighters staged at Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, positioned within striking distance of targets across western and central Iran. Vermont's Air Guard unit specializes in the Wild Weasel variant of F-35 operations, adding yet another layer of air defense suppression to the campaign. From the sea, Marine fighter Fighter Attack Squadron 314 flew the carrier-capable F-35C variant from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, conducting combat operations in one of the first major tests of the Navy's stealth fighter at war. Beyond dropping precision munitions, each F-35 functions as an airborne intelligence node. Its AN/APG-81 radar, distributed aperture system of 6 infrared cameras, and electronic surveillance receivers all feed into a central processor that builds a single fused tactical picture. Each picture updates in real time, and the pilot shares it with every other aircraft in the formation through secure data links. When one of these jets detects a hidden surface-to-air missile battery warming up its radar, every Strike Eagle, Fighting Falcon, and Super Hornet in the strike package knows the battery's location and threat status within seconds. In practical terms, this means a flight of 4 F-35 aircraft can map an entire sector of enemy airspace, identify the location and type of every active threat, and distribute targeting data to dozens of aircraft that lack the sensors to find those threats on their own. It turns the entire strike package into a networked organism where information flows instantly from the platforms that can see to the platforms that can shoot. During the opening days of Epic Fury, an Israeli F-35E, Adir achieved something no variant had done before. Over Tehran province, it shot down a Russian-made Iranian Yak-130 fighter jet in air-to-air combat. That engagement marked the first time any F-35 had destroyed a manned enemy aircraft in flight, and it was the first aerial kill scored by the Israeli Air Force since 1985. Critics spent years asking whether this aircraft could justify its price tag. Over the skies of Iran, it is answering them in real time. But for all its capability, there remains one fighter that even the Lightning II cannot replace. An aircraft conceived during the coldest years of the Cold War in a Lockheed Martin Skunk Works facility, built in numbers so small they can never be replenished, and still considered the undisputed master of the sky. This aircraft is irreplaceable. Number 1. The F-22 Raptor. Only 187 of these jets were ever manufactured before Congress terminated the production line in 2011. At the time, lawmakers argued the aircraft was simply too expensive, roughly $150 million per copy, and that its original purpose, defeating advanced Soviet fighters in aerial combat, no longer justified the cost in a world focused on counter-terrorism. 15 years later, a dozen of those irreplaceable Raptors deployed to Ovda Air Base in the Negev desert of southern Israel. Hardened aircraft shelters at the remote installation protected the jets from the threat of Iranian ballistic missile strikes. A fleet of KC-135 and KC-46 aerial refueling tankers converged on Ben Gurion International Airport nearby, ready to extend the fighter's combat radius deep into Iranian territory. It was the first time F-22 aircraft had ever been stationed in Israel for combat operations, and defense analysts immediately recognized what the deployment signaled. Stationing the Raptors in Israel placed them far from Iranian airspace, which raised an obvious logistical challenge. Flying from the Negev to targets in central Iran requires traversing the airspace of Syria, Iraq, Jordan, or Saudi Arabia. Several of those nations had already stated they would not permit American strike aircraft to use their airspace or bases for attacks on Iran. The tanker aircraft massing at Ben Gurion were the answer. With aerial refueling, F-22 aircraft could take circuitous routes that avoided uncooperative airspace and still arrive over their targets with full combat capability. This aircraft was engineered from the ground up to dominate the air. It sustained speeds above Mach 2 without afterburner through a capability called Super Cruise. Its radar cross-section appears roughly the size of a steel marble to enemy detection systems. The AN/APG-77 active electronically scanned array radar can track and engage multiple targets simultaneously at ranges that fourth-generation opponents simply cannot match. In training exercises spanning decades, individual Raptors have routinely defeated formations of 5 or more legacy fighters without ever being detected. The Raptor's stealth and sensors give it a decisive advantage. So what happens when you put this aircraft into a real shooting war? During Operation Midnight Hammer in June 2025, F-22 aircraft escorted B-2 Spirit stealth bombers on deep penetration runs against the Fordow and Natanz nuclear enrichment facilities. According to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Raptors provided protection for the strike aircraft by suppressing and defeating Iranian air defenses that threatened the bomber formation along the ingress route. That same escort mission was reprised during the opening waves of Epic Fury, with Raptors Raptors clearing the path for attack aircraft entering the most heavily defended sectors of Iranian airspace. No F-22 has ever engaged another manned fighter in air-to-air combat. Iran's aging fleet of F-14 Tomcats, F-4 Phantoms, and domestically produced Kausar jets posed no credible challenge, but that is precisely the point. Raptor presence creates a bubble of AIR superiority, so absolute that Iranian pilots understand the mathematics before their wheels leave the runway. Any aircraft that takes off to challenge American strike packages will be destroyed before its own radar registers a threat. This fighter is expected to remain the cornerstone of American air dominance until its successor, the next-generation Boeing F-47, enters service around 2030. Until then, the Raptor stands alone at the top. 7 aircraft, 7 distinct missions, 1 integrated air campaign that broke the air defenses of a nation 3 times the size of France in under a fortnight. Down low, the Warthog delivers firepower to the closest altitudes. Wild Weasel Falcons hunt and kill enemy radar. Strike Eagles haul the heaviest ordnance to the deepest targets. Super Hornets keep the carriers launching sorties around the clock. Growlers blind the entire enemy network from the inside. Lightning IIs see everything and share it with everyone. And above it all, Raptors guarantee that nothing in the sky challenges what happens below. No single aircraft could accomplish what these 7 achieve working in concert. That integration, the ability to weave wildly different machines into one coherent strike package, may be the real weapon that no adversary has managed to replicate. The skies over Iran will eventually go quiet. What these 7 fighters have already demonstrated is what happens when they do not. If you want to understand how Operation Epic Fury unfolded from the first Tomahawk launch to today, stay tuned for the next video, subscribe so you do not miss it.